Welcome to the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast with your host, Warren Maynard and John Beasley. Our mission is simple, inspiring men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Linking Shields podcast with Impact Players. My name is Warren Maynard. I'm the National Director of Impact Players. Today I have with me Lance Cibik, who is a speaker, author, coach, and just an all-around amazing dude with an incredible story. And today we're going to be talking about some of the lessons that he has learned throughout his life, and how adversity is oftentimes the fuel for deeper purpose in life. And so if you're new to Impact Players, we want to welcome you to the Impact Players community. We're all about inspiring men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders. And if that's something that you're interested in, we invite you to check out impactplayers.org. But again, with me today is Lance Cibik. Lance, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Warren, great to be with you this afternoon. And good hello to everybody listening in or watching.
All right. Well, I want to give you as much time as possible because you've got an incredible story. And I think even in sharing your bio, I might take away from that. But you live in the Charlotte area. You're married. You're a dad. You've had tremendous success in the business world. And recently, you've made a transition into the profession of becoming a speaker, a coach, a consultant. And so we'll learn more about some of those things that you're doing now in the book that you've written, Adversity Fuels Purpose. But what we like to do whenever we bring a guest onto our Linking Shields podcast is to simply ask them this four-word question. Tell me your story. So why don't we begin there? Because I think your story really does give context and powerful meaning to everything else that you share as a public speaker.
Well, tell me your story. I did a 45-minute keynote talk yesterday. I'm not going to speak for 45 minutes straight. So I'll do my best here just to give you a summary and then prompt you to ask questions where you feel like we want to go deeper, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, as you said, my book that just came out 3 weeks ago, titled Adversity Fuels Purpose: Create a Life of Impact and Success. And when I think about adversity, it really applies to any setback, any obstacle, any challenge, any trial or tribulation, pain or suffering that we've all experienced. Some have had it worse, some have had it pretty good, and there's a lot of us in between. And when I think about my own life of adversity, I usually start with being born to my mom and my dad, both high school graduates. Although my dad did initially have to drop out of high school due to some family circumstances, he did go on to get his GED. But they were working hourly wage jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. And so I talk about the fact that I was born with the odds stacked against me. I wasn't born to two college educated parents with two high income jobs, living in a nice neighborhood, money set aside for college one day so that I could go on to college and meet another college educated woman to both now have high paying jobs, living in a nice neighborhood, white picket fence, and maybe even a golden doodle. The odds were stacked against me from the moment I took my first breath. Now, what I didn't know, I was going to be met with another major obstacle in my life. You see, 4 days before my first birthday, I ultimately lost my mom to suicide. So here I am, shy of 1 year old, born to my dad, initially a high school dropout that did get his GED. He was working to make ends meet. And then now here I am, shy of my first birthday, going to face the world without my mom. More odds stacked against me, more adversity. I ultimately grew up in a step family with three step siblings and then two half brothers. And as I grew up in that step family, I was the outlier, the outcast. I was the kid from another mother. And with that came a certain level of misunderstanding and mistreatment. I was the outcast, the outlier. Now, even though there was some challenge in that family dynamic, We did find our way to church. I don't know exactly how, but we were overachievers. We went on Sunday morning, we went on Sunday night, and we also went Wednesday night. And during that process, Warren, I became a born again Christian. In many ways, life was going pretty good within the church, but there was also lots of struggle behind the scenes. And I started to ask God, why? I'm a born again Christian. Why is there still family struggle? Why is there still financial hardship? Where are you in all of this? I thought, hey, once I become a born again Christian, life's supposed to be perfect. I had this idea in my mind, well, if Jesus is perfect and I'm a born again Christian, well, doesn't my life then become perfect? And I struggled with that question for a lot of years. I ultimately found myself at the age of 13 convincing myself that if my mom thought leaving this world was best, and oh, by the way, isn't heaven a better place than this sinful, corrupt world?
Mm.
If I follow my mom and just commit suicide myself, well, hey, I can hope that my mom was also a Christian. I can meet her in heaven. I don't have to wait. And oh, by the way, what's the point of hanging out here anyway if heaven's a better place? And so I made an attempt that afternoon in my bedroom with a ruler with a metal edge. I was unsuccessful that day, but ultimately, when my dad saw the marks on my wrist, it was one of many catalysts that ultimately led to the divorce of my dad and stepmom. I'll pause there, Warren, just to give the audience some time to digest all of that and see if you've got any thoughts or questions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing and clearly, there's some highs and some lows there. Obviously, you came to know Christ and you were born again, and that's a sense of tremendous joy. And yet also not fully understanding what that means, it created a level of disillusionment in you, which I think a lot of Christians can wrestle with is they think, okay, my life is really bad. I'm going to become a Christian. And once I become a Christian, my life will be really good. And I won't have any problems, struggles, pain, suffering, adversity. And yet, for those of us who have been in it for a little while, we realize that there is no promise that life is going to get easier or become more painful, but rather instead, Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble, but I give you my peace. And so obviously you kind of found yourself now at 13 having attempted suicide. Now your dad and stepmom are going through a divorce. And I'm sure that left you really, asking a lot more questions, maybe feeling even more confused. And were you sensing any kind of blame for or shame for in your mind, bringing that on? Where did you go emotionally after all of that took place?
Yeah, I would say my reaction was a sense of freedom
Hmm.
because it was now just my dad and I living by ourselves. My ex-step siblings stayed with my ex-stepmom. My half brothers stayed with my ex-stepmom. And it was just my dad and I in our own apartment for a couple of years. My two half brothers would come over for visitation. But really, I felt a sense of freedom.
Hmm.
But it also was a juncture where my dad walked away from the church, walked away from his Christian faith because going to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, every single week. And through those marital challenges that they were having, some of the family struggles that we were all having, they leaned on the elders and the deacons and some of the church counseling. But for whatever reason, that did not work or it didn't solve the problem or problems. And that was really challenging for my dad, and maybe in some ways still is today, and for me in the years to come.
Hmm.
So I would say, even though I didn't feel like I lost my Christian card,
Hmm.
I started to really wrestle with a lot of questions and doubts about my faith. I'm going into high school, other things became priority in regard to school and sports and interest in dating girls,
Mm-hmm.
all of that. My dad, at the end of my senior year, or excuse me, at the end of my junior year, he wanted to live with a girlfriend that he started dating. And he had asked me to come and live with him and her. And after some difficult conversation, I said, "Hey, Dad, look, I lost my mom to suicide 4 days before my first birthday. I grew up in this difficult step family situation. The last thing I really feel like doing is going to live with this random woman that I don't even really know that well as I'm wrapping up my junior year and potentially going through my entire senior year of high school."
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to live alone. So here I am wrapping up my junior year of high school. I'm living in my own apartment my entire senior year. Nobody's making me breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Nobody's waking me up. Nobody's telling me what I have to do and not do. I started working 5 days a week at a local restaurant to help pay some of the bills. I had to buy my first car from a car auction. And I had to decide, Warren, about that time, what was I going to do about it? That despite my circumstances, how was I going to respond to it? I spent some time speaking in high schools. I'm doing a commencement speech tomorrow. I
Mm-hmm.
spent some time speaking in college and youth groups. And I talk about some things I had to do around that time. I go deeper in my book. Number one, I had to decide to be the change.
Mm-hmm.
So what now what? It's a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
How was I going to respond to it? I could make the decision to hang out with the wrong crowd. I could make the decision to drink and drug it away. I could make the decision to drop out of high school and just continue on previous paths that my family members may have taken. Or I could use that adversity as fuel for purpose to say, hey, no, 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 no. It stops with me and I start afresh for myself and my future family.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, I had to take action. I had to rise up and not just think about it, but actually do something about it. Lots of people think about who they want to be or what they want to do, but not everybody takes action because they're waiting for the perfect plan. And so I had to say, okay, what can I control to get myself out of this situation to have a better future? I knew that if I could study a little harder and get good grades, I knew that if I could get a job and work 5 days a week and help pay the bills, that that could set me up to get to college one day,
Mm-hmm.
which I also continue to do all through college, working 5 days a week, every single week, paying my own apartment, my own bills, paying my own college tuition for 4 straight years. And I had to hustle. That was number three. I had to hustle. I had to outbeat you, Warren. I had to look at people around me and say, what was I willing to do that others are not willing to do to create separation so that I could hustle, so I could be successful, whatever that meant at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are things that started developing me at that juncture as a junior and going into my senior year. And I continued that all through college. Graduating with a 3.8 GPA, chancellor's list, working 5 days a week, really focused, really zoned in. You're trying to become something, to become a first generation college student, which I was successful at.
Well, and I mean, I think about your dad, and, a lot of times when we're teenagers, teenage sons especially, we don't really think about what our dads might be dealing with and the pain that they may be experiencing, and to see your dad kind of go through his, own personal journey of faith and then loss of faith and perhaps some sort of a kind of wandering, after that, the impact of his struggles clearly, was passed down to you, and yet you were able to somehow, it seems like as I hear your story, it was almost like you were able to like step outside of yourself and see your situation, for what it was, and that, that in many ways you were a victim, but you weren't going to live as one. You were going to choose to take your life and do something with it. So, as you speak to your high school students and to men of all ages, how do you kind of help men to kind of move from that victim mindset or that, excuse mindset to like, hey, wherever you are, whatever you're going through, whatever your dad may have done, whatever your mom may have done, whatever cards that were dealt to you, there's a way to kind of step outside of yourself and see this situation for what it is.
Yeah, it's a great question. And my dad had his own bag of tricks. I write about this in my book. His dad walked out on him at an early age. His mom was working multiple jobs. He has two siblings that were a decade or 15 years older than him. And in many ways, my dad grew up on his own while his mom was working day jobs and night jobs. My dad was taking care of himself in many ways, down a long driveway in an apple orchard where it was pitch black. And he was isolated and he had issues with his own relationship with his own father. And ultimately, he became a better version of a man and a dad relative to what his own father was. But that didn't mean that he didn't struggle, to your point.
Mhm.
He was simply trying to find happiness with a girlfriend. And my vantage point at that time was, hey, dad, you're choosing her over me,
Yeah.
versus recognizing that he was simply just trying to find a relationship and some happiness. And if that meant that he wanted to go move in and live with this woman, then that wasn't necessarily him choosing her over me. He was just trying to bring us all together and
Yeah.
continue to move forward in his own life. And I can see that now as an adult man, as a husband, as a father, that my lens and my vantage point is very different. But when I talk to youth or I talk to grown men or women for that matter, I always just come back to controlling your controllables, controlling your controllables.
Yeah.
From the moment your feet hit the floor in the morning to the moment your head hits the pillow at night, did you maximize the day? Did you maximize the opportunity?
Mm.
Did you get a good sleep? Yes or no? Number two, what did you eat or what did you not eat? Number three, what did you drink or what did you not drink? Imagine if you just drank water all day and nothing else, no soda, no juice, no alcohol. Imagine. What did you watch? How many Netflix episodes did you binge? What are you listening to? Music, podcast?
Mm.
What are you reading? Who are you spending time with? Are they adding value or are they taking away? What are you doing for your job? Does it light you up? Does it bring you joy? Are you maximizing your zone of genius, what I call your unique gifts and talents that are efficient and effective? Control your controllables. So when I think about adversity, we all have it in our past, or there's something that we're dealing with today, or there's something right around the corner that we can't see coming.
Mm.
And yes, we're going to have feelings based on that adversity, sadness, grief, anger, bitterness, resentment, all of these things that can keep us stuck or box us in. Or we can use it to say, no, 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 no. Like, not for me. This isn't going to be for me. This isn't the way I'm going to roll. I'm not listening to that. Just because you're doing that doesn't mean I'm going to do that. Just because I was born into this doesn't mean I have to continue this. As long as I'm breathing, as long as I have the ability to make choices, I can choose this path over here. I can fight against culture and what everybody else is normalizing. And I could talk about this for an hour, but that at its core, it's about controlling your controllables. So what, now what? Yes, it's happened or it's happening, but as long as you're breathing, as long as you're thinking, at some point, you're going to have an opportunity to choose how you react to it.
Mm.
And can you use it as fuel to drive you forward
Yeah.
for some purpose, some impact, and also some success in your life or your business? That's the core message.
It's a powerful message. It's a message that men need to hear in great great need right now. And I think there's a lot of men that are just not taking responsibility for their lives. They're not taking responsibility for their families, their career, their marriage, and they're just wanting to point the finger and say, it's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. But I want to go back to that idea of controlling your controllables because, I think that, as you kind of shared your story, Lance, you were a child who then got introduced to Christianity in the church. You became born again. You were going to church 3 times a week. And, by your own admission, what I heard you say was that, hey, I was going to church all the time, and yet in my mind, things weren't really getting any better. It was still hard, painful, challenging. You go through more adversity, and then somewhere around 17 years old, you move out on your own, and you kind of adopt what I hear men say, the mentality of, if it's going to be, it's up to me. That, like, I'm going to be the change. I'm going to be the one to pull myself up by my bootstraps and become the man, the success story that I want to be. And so I wonder, where did your faith kind of re-engage in your life in that journey? Was there a point where you began to realize that, hey, there are things that are in my control, but there are also things that I have to rely on God in order for me to succeed in life?
Yeah, great question. Very common. High school years, 20s, 30s. A lot of men are seeking to prove themselves for a lot of different reasons. I talk about many of the P's that men struggle with. A couple of them I'll rattle off very quickly. Number one, we had to, at some point, protect ourselves, be bigger, faster, stronger, fight back against the other guy, protect our girlfriend, protect our wife, protect our family, both physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Protection P, number one. Number two, we had to provide for ourselves. We had to get a job. Maybe we had to help buy our first car. Maybe we had to help pay our school. And then we end up growing up and providing for a spouse, providing for a family. So P, provide. Number three, performance is usually the big one for most men. At some point, we started performing for grades, for sports. Then we get into work, and it's the never-ending pursuit of performance. What have you done for me lately? Hey, nice job last year, but now your sales goal is even bigger. Perform, possess. Hey, nice house, but couldn't it be bigger and nicer? Hey, nice watch, but how about an upgrade? Hey, you got an iPhone, but there's a new one out. Hey, look at that person over there. They just got back from the Bahamas. So the never-ending pursuit of possessions. And that ultimately leads to number five, pressure. Lots of men bottle all this stuff up because they're taught to be no kinks in the armor. Hey, by the way, you're a vice president at a company. You've got this status in the community, and it all bottles up in pressure and they isolate. And that leads to anxiety and stress and burnout and misalignment, addictions. Everybody knows what those are. Even something as simple as a sports addiction
Yeah.
and fantasy football and online gambling and all of this stuff that men are distracting themselves with. And I did that in my 20s and 30s. I had lots of success in corporate America, climbed the ladder, had status and titles, and ate at all the fancy restaurants, and drove a sports car, and bought a custom suit. And so, in many ways, I had made it, right? I was successful by the standard that I was trying to pursue. In my early 30s, I was involved in a tragic car accident
Mm.
where there was an altercation between two men in this restaurant bar. And I was approaching this intersection at this restaurant bar. That altercation made its way to the front of the restaurant bar, and one of the guys stumbled into the street as my car was passing by the restaurant bar. And I ended up hitting this man, and I ran over him. And that night he died.
Mm.
Here I am in my early 30s, successful on paper, money, status, nice home, nice car. Adversity struck again. I couldn't see it coming. I couldn't plan for it. I couldn't control it.
Mm.
And it's exactly when I needed God to show up some way, somehow. I was wrestling with my faith. I was wrestling with my career. I was wrestling with relationships. How am I ever going to find a girlfriend? Can I really get married? Everybody in my family has been divorced, maybe even several times. Why would I ever do this? I mean, how am I going to be with just one woman the rest of my life? Are you crazy? I mean, I had all sorts of questions. Hey, what about all the Muslims? Are they all going to hell? What about all the Buddhists? Are they going to hell? What about the Hindus that live next door? They're pretty good people. I guess they're going to hell too. I mean, I was just asking myself all sorts of questions about my faith, about purpose, about life, about career, about relationships. There was a man that I had worked with years prior. His name is Land, 20 years older than me. We weren't friends. We weren't keeping in touch, but he read about my car accident in the paper. And he goes on to say that he felt a prompt by the Holy Spirit. He said, "Hey, I know this guy named Lance, and somehow, some way, he found my address and he wrote me a handwritten note. And he
Mm.
basically said, Hey, if you ever want to talk, here's my number. You ever want to grab a cup of coffee? Let's do it." One cup of coffee led to many cups of coffee and breakfast and lunches and dinners. And Land started pouring into me. He started coming alongside of me. He started helping me answer a lot of these difficult questions. He became a mentor to me. I
Mm.
kept asking myself, why does this guy Land care so much about me? Why is he texting me? Why is he asking me to coffee? Why does he keep doing it? Why does he care about me? I mean, we weren't friends. He's older than me. What's going on here? But other people like Land started showing up in my life to help bring me back to my faith, right? That surrender process
Mm.
of, okay, maybe it's not all about seeking to be perfect, because that'll never happen. Maybe it's more recognizing that that's the whole point of the gospel. John 3:16, I've got to believe. That's the whole point of grace. That's the whole point of faith. And that just became a long process, Warren. And I come back to, okay, keep it simple, stay consistent, achieve results. I apply that mentality in other aspects of my life. So I go, okay, cool. John 3:16,
Mm.
I still believe. I accepted Jesus into my heart. I'm not losing my Christian card. Okay, cool. Can wrap my head around that a little bit.
Yeah.
Number two, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Got that? Cool. The first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. What would Jesus do? Love and serve, love and serve, love and serve. So whenever I start to get distracted and I start to get all caught up in the entire Bible and not having all the answers to the difficult questions, and what about all the major religions, and why does God allow pain and suffering, and what about this and what about that, and why did this happen, and God, did you cause it, or God, did you allow it? I just have to, for me, Warren, and for the listeners, I have to come back to basics. Okay, cool. What's the gospel? John 3:16. Cool, I got it. What am I called to do when the morning sun comes up and I'm approaching my day? What am I called to do? Cool. Go love and serve people. Go be as selfless as I possibly can. What would Jesus do? WWJD. If Jesus was sitting right here next to me right now today, or he was walking along with me throughout my entire day, what would Jesus do? So try to be more like that. Don't overcomplicate it.
Mm.
And that was the beginning, Warren, of a journey of connecting back to my faith. People started showing up in my life. I don't even know how. I'm rejoining a church. I'm volunteering at the church. I meet a girlfriend that becomes my fiance, that becomes my wife. Now I'm married with two kids. And guess what? I still have struggle. And that's why I have to keep coming back to the simplicity of some of these verses. And that's why I go and attend men's groups,
Mm.
so that I can continue to not live alone and isolate, but I can continue to be strengthened through other people's testimonies, to know that God can still be working despite the adversity and the sin of the world.
Welcome to Impact Players, where we inspire men to be great husbands, fathers, and leaders by equipping them to thrive in the relationships that matter most. Are you asking yourself, how do I become a better man? How can I grow as a husband and father? Can I succeed both at work and at home? We believe the answer is yes. Impact Players provides rock-solid answers and practical tools for men who want to improve in every area of life. Whether you're single, married, a new dad, or a grandfather, our men's groups, leadership training, and resources will help you thrive. Recent studies show men are struggling more than ever. That's why Impact Players is here. We offer cohorts where you can connect with real men like you, courses with actionable steps, and a nationwide community dedicated to winning at home and at work. Join our online community today and access a wealth of materials designed for your growth. Transform your life, impact your family, business, and community. Ready to get started? Visit impactplayers.org now. Be the man you are destined to be with Impact Players.
And I mean, I love that story. I mean, obviously, there's very few things that could possibly compare to just the absolute tragic shock of realizing that you took someone's life in a vehicular accident, which was not your fault at all. But to have that man named Land, go the extra mile to look up your address, to write you a handwritten note, to meet you for coffee, and to keep digging in to, investing in you. I mean, what a game changer. I mean, to me, like guys like Land are what impact players is all about. They may not get the platform, the book, or the stage, but there is, there's no Lance today without Land, those years ago. And so, I'm just inspired by him and what he's done in your life. But it obviously set you on a new course, and you took the hardships, you took some of the lessons that you learned as a young man, and then you took the faith that was restored and rebuilt through your discipleship with Land. And now here you are, you're a husband, you're a father, you're a leader, you're engaged in a local church, you're serving, you're impacting the lives of other people through your ministry and through your work and relationships. So somewhere over these last couple of years, there was some kind of a new stirring that took place that took you out of the corporate world and into the the coaching and speaking world that you're in today. What caused you to kind of step out of the comfort of being successful in your career to step into the adversity of moving into a new line of work that really has no guarantees and not much of a safety net? So what's that journey been like for you? You know, were the things from your background, were those inspiration for you to risk this, or was that um did that somehow, was that something that you had to overcome in order to take this step?
Great question, great observation. I'll continue with the story with Land, which will provide you and the audience a bit more clarity on the response to that question. See, Land was pouring into me. He was a mentor to me, and I was the mentee. We have a saying at the church I go to, bring heaven to Charlotte one person at a time. One person at a time. Because the ripple effect of that one person at a time can be hundreds, could be thousands for
Yeah.
generations, one person at a time. So Lance pouring into me and he says, hey, Lance, I've got this son named Chad.
Mm.
And Chad is 10 years younger than me. And at the time, Chad was battling drugs and alcohol addiction, some mental health stuff. He's 10 years younger than me. And he said, hey, would you start spending some time with my son, Chad? I said, Land, anything for you, sure.
Mm.
So Chad and I would get together for coffee and lunch. Chad would come play basketball with me. He was open, I was open. He would share, I would share. He was vulnerable, I was vulnerable. And so I started now putting on my mentor hat
Mm.
to Land's son, Chad, the
Wow.
mentee. Land's the mentor to me. I'm the mentor to his son, Chad. You with me?
Yeah.
Chad ultimately gets on the other side of recovery. He had gone to a couple of different rehab places, but he gets clean and sober at 30 years old. Then he decides, okay, cool. How can I use my past adversity and use it as purpose? So
Mm.
Chad says, okay, I'm going to go and speak into high schools
Mm.
and warn about drugs and alcohol addiction and the slippery slope and look at what happened to my life. Number two, he starts a podcast called the Rabbit Hole Podcast. He starts sharing his story of addiction and recovery and God's work through it. He starts interviewing guests on his podcast to share their story of addiction or struggle, health, but ultimately how God worked through it for purpose and how they recovered and how they healed. Number three, he starts going back to school
Mm.
to get education in addiction recovery. And lastly, number four, he starts working at a place called Charlotte Rescue Mission, which is a Christian-based center where men can come for 4 months and get free drug and alcohol recovery. They get a bed, they get meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They have daily chapel. I mean, all of these things. Chad starts working the night shift there 2 or 3 nights a week. So Chad was taking his past adversity and using it for purpose to go and impact other people's lives. Well, Chad goes, "Hey, Lance, I know you got a story." At the time, I had a corporate job. He said, "I think you should start sharing your story." "Chad, thanks, but no thanks, bro. I'm not sharing anything. I speak at work and that's it. I'm not sharing my story and hardships and how I overcame. No thanks." He kept asking me to come join his podcast. I finally said, "Okay, cool. I'll join your podcast." I don't like the fact that I could share something on a podcast where, hypothetically speaking, anybody around the world could listen to it, but he kept being persistent. So I was a guest on his podcast. That was the first time I was a guest on a podcast. He also said, "Hey, why don't you start speaking? I'm speaking in these schools. Why don't you do that too?"
Mm.
Well, while I was at work in my corporate job, there were some partnerships with some local high schools where we were going in and doing financial literacy.
Mm.
And somebody said, "Hey, Lance, would you kick this off and just share a little bit about your background and what financial literacy means to you?" Well, I spoke for 5 minutes and the guy goes, "Oh my gosh, that was awesome." So the second event we did with another school, he said, "Would you do a 10-minute version of that?" So I did a 10-minute version of that. Then he said, "Oh my gosh, that 10-minute version was better than the 5-minute version. At this next financial literacy event at the school, will you do a 15-minute version of that?" So I did a 15-minute version of that. And then I had an opportunity to speak at my church at a local men's breakfast.
Mm.
75 grown men, just like you and I, Warren. And I said, "Okay, cool. I'm going to share my testimony on how God's worked despite all the adversity." And then people would come up to me after and say, "Oh my gosh, you touched me this way," or "Oh my gosh, you need to keep doing more of that for the benefit of other men." Last year, in February of 2023, there's a Christian business group called New Canaan Society. And it's a nationwide group. There's about 60 chapters across the country. And I started going to this group, and every week a man shares their testimony,
Mm.
volunteers to share their testimony. And I noticed on the schedule that Chad had signed up in a couple of weeks to speak. And I didn't even know Chad was going to it.
Mm.
So I thought to myself, well, if Chad can share his testimony here, maybe I should also share my testimony. And I noticed there was an open slot the week before Chad was going to speak. So in February of last year, I spoke. Chad was there, and Land, his dad, was there.
Wow.
The very next week, Chad spoke, and I had the opportunity to introduce Chad before he spoke to the guys that were in the room.
Mm.
As I would speak, the audience members would tell me how it touched them.
Mm.
That talk led to me speaking at another New Canaan Society chapter in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Then they said, "Hey, we want you to do this in Orlando, Florida." Then they said, "Hey, will you come speak to our Manhattan, New York City chapter?"
Mm.
In June of 2024, just a couple of months after, Chad was working an overnight shift at Charlotte Rescue Mission. After all the other men went to bed, he goes to his room to go to bed. But at 33 years old, Chad didn't wake up the next morning. He died in his sleep due to a heart condition.
Mm.
This is going to answer the big question you asked me. So here, Chad at 30 years old gets clean and sober. He starts using his past adversity as purpose to go out and impact thousands of people's lives.
Mm.
And Chad dies at 33. When did Jesus die? 33. When are most of what's recorded about his life in his last 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Chad, 30 to 33.
Mm.
At the time, I had gotten laid off from a corporate job. I had 13 years at this corporate job. I was offered a severance package. And I thought to myself, Warren, the logical, rational thing for me to do would be to go apply for another senior vice president job at a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
But here I am, what started as me speaking on the side, sharing my testimony here, talking about adversity or financial literacy over there, being prompted by Chad to be a guest on his podcast. I show up at this New Canaan Society. Chad's on the agenda. I didn't even know he was going to this group. I then volunteered to also speak on that agenda. Chad keeps pushing me and encouraging me to speak. The more I would speak, the more people would tell me how my speaking was impacting them.
Mm.
And then here Chad dies in June of 2024. And I had the wonderful opportunity to be a speaker at his service where over 1,000 people were packed in to that church.
Wow.
So to answer your question, Warren, I felt called.
Mm.
I started considering what is success and my definition of it today versus what I thought it was.
Mm.
What if it is not about the title and the money and trying to accumulate the most in net worth? What if success can be defined as significance
Mm.
and kingdom impact? And if that meant I had to start off at zero to become a speaker, to become an executive coach, and to start writing a book 9 months ago, I just had to trust God that all of these connections and pieces that were coming together were forming a puzzle. I just couldn't see the full picture. And here I am. I'm still taking messy action and leaning into faith.
Wow. Yeah. Once again, I'm blown away by all the elements of your story. And yet, I love the fact that you keep showing up, that you keep putting in your best. I have uh, a philosophy that I call the principle of diligent dependence. And the principle of diligent dependence is that we are called to do everything that we know God desires and commands for us to do. Um, but we also do that in total dependence upon God. And I think you're learning that in a new way on a deeper level right now as you're doing all the stuff. Like I see you on LinkedIn, you're out there, you're promoting your book, you're doing speeches, you're talking to people, you're here on this podcast. All those things are great things that are necessary for you to build what you're building. And yet at the same time, without God going before you, opening up those doors, like those quote random, coincidences that happened all along your journey, that was the hand of God working and doing things that you could have never done for yourself. So let's turn just for the last couple minutes to speak to the men who are listening to this. They've heard your story. Some of these guys probably their jaws are on the floor and they're trying to, just process everything that you shared. But what would you say to these guys that maybe they're going through their own adversity right now? It's a divorce, it's a death, it's the loss of a job, it's a total lack of purpose or identity. It may be that their faith has been rattled and shattered in ways that they never expected. What would you say to those guys that would help them find a new way to frame the adversity that they're facing right now?
I got to share this one little story
Mm.
to finish the connectivity to the land and the Chad and that accident, just as an example.
Mm.
I was speaking at a corporate event here in January. I was the motivational keynote speaker. I'm not going into a Christian faith-based setting. I'm intentionally not talking about my faith per se, but every once in a while, I can slip in the word God and I can say, hey, Land Height felt a prompt by the Holy Spirit to write me a handwritten note. And I talk a little bit about the connectivity. Every presentation I give today, there's a picture on the screen with Land, me, and his son, Chad,
Mm.
just like the presentation I gave yesterday. Well, after that presentation in January of this year, a lady came up to me after in tears. And she introduced herself, and I said, hey, nice to meet you. I'll call her Sarah.
Mm.
And Sarah says, I got to share something with you, Lance. I said, sure, go ahead. She said, hey, I remember that car accident.
Mm.
She said, I live just a couple of houses away from that intersection, from that restaurant bar.
Mm.
And I remember the scene of the accident. There were police cars everywhere. There were helicopters in the air because the guy that pushed him fled, and the helicopters were trying to track him down in the neighborhood. She said, I thought to myself, one man is now dead. My heart broke. Then I thought to myself, there's another man that's on foot and they're trying to chase him down and find him. She said, but my heart immediately went to the driver.
Mm.
She said, my heart broke for the driver. And she said, hey, Lance, what you don't know is that night, she said, I said a prayer
Mm.
and I asked for protection and peace over the driver.
Mm.
She said, I didn't know your name or anything. But that night, I said a prayer for you. And here she's meeting me 13 years later in
Wow.
a corporate event
Mm.
as an inspirational speaker.
Mm.
As I said, I don't have all the answers to very difficult questions, but I can't help but think, Warren, and the listeners, that her prayer is the prompt that Land Height feels when he's reading the newspaper
Mm.
in his home office,
Mm.
that pushes him to write a handwritten note. Nobody had written me a handwritten note except him. That leads to this beautiful relationship between me and Land and then me and his son Chad, which leads to you and I talking at this very moment, Warren,
Mm.
which leads to Land and Chad being in my book in the dedication,
Yeah.
which leads to almost a full chapter of me discussing Land and Chad,
Yeah.
which leads to me speaking about Land and Chad to the 100 people yesterday with their pictures on the screen and the 100 books that got signed yesterday, which leads to me speaking tomorrow to a graduating class of seniors at a private Christian school and the 500 or 600 adults that will be in the room. And that Land and Chad connection and that God connection will be told tomorrow night.
Wow.
So I would encourage the listeners that, yeah, adversity is real, right? Pain and suffering, that stuff's real. Health diagnosis is real. Death is real. Relationship struggles, those are real. Job impacts, loss of them, financial hardship, yeah, that stuff's real. I'm with you. I feel it.
Mm.
But we just have to trust as much as we possibly can that despite what's happening right now today, how we're feeling, as difficult as it may be, if we just keep trusting, we keep putting our faith, we may get some clarity tomorrow, it may be next week, it may be next month, it may be years. We may not get it until we're on the other side of eternal life.
Yeah.
But I hope my story, the message, the listeners can find themselves somewhere in it, and it gives them just a bit more hope
Hmm.
that it can all be connected and that God can still be working that despite the adversity.
Yeah. We know that verse that, um, you know, God works all things together for the good of those who love him according to his purpose. And we don't often know or understand what that purpose is. And it doesn't all come at once. 13 years is a long time to find out um, about that woman's prayer. And yet it came right on time for you and for your story and where you're at right now. I want to bring this time to an end by, asking you to share a little bit about the different ways that you are able to, share your story, invest in men and women, um, the book and your speaking. Just share some of the ways that the listeners across the country can engage with you, follow you, support you, and perhaps even bring you in to be a speaker for an event or for a training or whatever that might be.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Warren, to share. First of all, it's been good getting to know you just over the past year. Here are the main ways for those that want to stay in touch. Number one, social media. The only place I hang out today is LinkedIn.
Mhm.
So you can just type in Lance Cibik, C-I-B as in boy, I-K. You can find me on LinkedIn. I don't have Facebook. You won't find me. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. I've been very intentional about not having those.
Yeah.
Every second counts, and I'm thankful that at least today I've resisted those. Nothing against those that have them. I
Mhm.
know I should have them for lots of reasons, owning my own business as a speaker, as a coach, as an author. Never say never. I do post some videos on YouTube. I need to get better at that, but LinkedIn's the place I hang out. I post every day at 7:30 in the morning. So follow me there, connect with me there. Number two, you can find me at lancecibic.com. My website is down right now because it's being completely overhauled, but that should be up probably in the next week or so. My book, Adversity Fuels Purpose, is out on Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble. You can get that ebook. You can get it soft cover, hardcover. I'm considering an Audible. I've had some requests for that.
Mhm.
But it's been pretty cool. It's been out for 3 weeks. It's a top new release. It's a bestseller in midlife self-help and work-life balance. Many people have sat down and read the whole book through over coffee or while they're eating a pizza or while they're taking a flight across the country. So it's an easy read. It's
Mhm.
very conversational. And my hope is that it impacts you in some way.
Mhm. Yeah. And maybe just share what are some of the different ways that you do speak. You talked about speaking in schools, corporate events. You do some coaching. What are some of the different ways that you come on podcasts, obviously? What are some different ways that people can bring you in?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that question. As a speaker, I get encouraged to niche down.
Yeah.
And although I do have a topic or two, I love speaking to high school students. I
Mhm.
love speaking to college students. And I love speaking to corporate men and women in their 20s all the way up until their 60s and 70s and 80s if they're still out there working. So
Mhm.
my message in many ways is universal. I would say if you've got any connection to a high school and you know the principal is bringing speakers in, that's a great audience because I can speak hope and life into those high school students that once upon a time I used to be them,
Yeah.
especially those high school students that are in challenging family situations, challenging financial situations, what are referred to as Title I schools. I can go into those schools where I once used to go to school and get free lunch. I can go in there and give them hope and encouragement. Corporations, if you're a leader, a manager, an HR, and you attend conferences and associations and corporate events and you see speakers show up on those agendas, love to talk to you about how my message could have an impact. On the coaching side, I call it performance coaching.
Mhm.
You can refer to it as executive business coaching, life coaching, health coaching, communication skills coaching. But when I think about the people that work in my coaching practice, CEOs, vice presidents of sales, consultants. These are people that just want someone to talk to help them level up in their health, want someone to help them sharpen their mindset and their purpose. Many come to me wanting to enhance their communication and presentation skills, their
Mhm.
overall executive presence. I'm not their friend. I'm not their family member. I'm not their boss. I'm not their coworker. I'm not their therapist. I'm the
Mhm.
person that's listening, helping them come up with goals, helping them close the gap from where they are today and where they really want to go to
Mhm.
really enhance their overall life and business in the way they're showing up. And so that's been really cool as that coaching practice has been built out.
It's fantastic. Well, guys, I just encourage you, go online, get a copy of Lance's book, Adversity Fuels Purpose. Reach out to him. Go check out his website. If it's not up by the time this comes out, go back and check it again and get this man somehow connected to the people that you represent and influence. But Lance, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. I look forward to opportunities in the future for us to be able to link shields, perhaps to see you come and speak to other impact players across the country or even in Charlotte at some point in the future. But thank you guys so much for being a part of this. We look forward to having you back on the podcast sometime down the road. But thank you, and God bless you for all you're doing.
Thanks, Ward.
Thank you for joining us for the Impact Players Linking Shields podcast. We hope you're inspired to become a better husband, father, and leader. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a 5-star review, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Stay connected and continue your journey with us. Visit impactplayers.org for more resources and updates. Thanks for being a part of the Impact Players community. Keep thriving in the relationships that matter most.